Hello! Nearly fell. I learned a little while ago that to be classed as a woodworker, you should have at least honed your skills on two projects. Number one, making a box. Never done that. Number two, making a cutting board. Never done that. So I got a bit of inspiration earlier to make a cutting board, but I've got nothing but pallets. And then, while I was getting some wood for the fire, I thought, this is hardwood, it's been barn seasoned, it's ready to go. The only trouble is, I don't know if it's food safe, I don't know how to cut it up into usable material, and I really don't know what I'm doing. And also it's really, really, really cold.
So before I get started, I understand that my fence, which is about 20mm tall, is not sufficient to be pushing big blocks of firewood through. I'm not sure you should be pushing big blocks of firewood through the table saw at all, but I decided to make a fence, only temporary. I know, it looks awful, but it also gave me a chance to use my new Black Friday toy, my DeWalt Impact Driver. I got this for £45. What a bargain. Anyway, once I'm done with this project, this fence, binned. So over to my awful Aldi table saw. I set the height of the blade to absolute maximum, find the squarest edge of the firewood, and then just get to ripping it up. This could be quite hairy, so I make sure to use the push stick and I keep my fingers well away from that blade. So here's all my processed wood. I've tried to mill everything down to about 40mm cuboids, and all I'm doing here is picking out what I think would make a good face. So I'm going to scribble a line on everything that I want to appear on the top and the bottom of the cutting board. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to throw everything through the thicknesser in a second, and I don't want to bother thicknessing the top and bottom face because I'm going to be able to put the whole board through the thicknesser afterwards. So I just thought, why waste time thicknessing something that can be done later? Anyway, once I've scribbled on all of these, I'll then just feed them through the thicknesser and hopefully have a nice straight flat side, and the bit without the squiggle on will be the glue up side. So I do actually own a cutting board. I'm not a savage. Might even call it a chopping board, depending on which side of the pond you're from. So I took the measurements of that, and that's 400mm wide, and it's got a length of 250mm. I might have got my length and width mixed up, but you know what I mean. What I haven't shown you is I actually took some of those pieces that I've run through the thicknesser and I chopped them up into random sizes. I didn't want a cutting board that was made up of just perfect lengths of wood. I wanted it to look like it was made up of bricks or blocks, if you like, and I also wanted it to be a bit random. Once I've got everything arranged in a pattern that I like, I then go through, just make sure I'm picking the best face. Now, chances are, with my skill, that there is going to be a face of this cutting board that is better than the other face. So to make sure that when I start the glue up, I'm gluing everything on the right side, I numbered everything, working from left to right and then right to left. Kind of like a game of snakes and ladders, except much less fun because I don't know if I mentioned, it is freezing in the garage.
It is so cold in here. There is zero chance that this is going to set overnight because it's about -2 in here. So I'm going to try and sneak it inside without the wife seeing, put it in the spare room, glue it up, close the door. I hope she don't go in there. First thing to note, absolutely love the look of this wood. This is genuinely the first time I've worked with anything other than pallets or plywood. It looks incredible now. By the time it's got oil on, I think this is going to be absolutely amazing. Bad news. I've got one very good side. There's a couple of tiny little gaps where I clearly should have used a bit more glue, but nothing that can't be fixed. The other side, I've got some considerable gaps, especially here. I didn't realise that this piece wasn't square. I've got a chip out here and a chip out here. I mean, you only need one side of a cutting board, don't you? I'll just leave it permanently face down. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to sanding it with the bag on, collect some sawdust, and then use the sawdust to fill the gaps. I was hoping to get this finished today, but I can't see that happening. Make a cutting board. It's the entry to woodworking. It'd be easy. Probably would be if I wanted a tight arse and used firewood.
Before I got down to sanding the face of the board, I decided to square it off. And for this, I'm using my other Black Friday deal, my new track saw. Now, when I first moved into this house, I bought a DeWalt cordless circular saw, and please don't think that I'm hating on this, but I just don't use it. There's not enough occasions where I need to use it. And when I was doing my research, everybody online said, oh, you can make your own fence or your own guide. Like, it doesn't happen. You can make it, but it's never going to be as square. It's never going to be as convenient. This thing is an absolute beast, and it creates such clean edges. It's not even a good one. It's an Evolution one. So it is a real budget entry track saw, and I already love it.
Can I find the bag for the sander? Of course I can't. Will this bag work? Probably not. Will it get in the way and annoy me? Definitely. Don't know how I can't find it. My garage is so clean and tidy. Too cold to deal with this.
Now, once I'd quit my whinging and whining, I got to sanding. Now, this is a bit of a step back in time for you because I'd actually done a bit of sanding before I took the edges off with that track saw. Once you start sanding, you just keep sanding. You do some more sanding, and then more sanding. And then after about half an hour of sanding, you're left with about a tablespoon, if that, of usable sawdust. Turns out that when you use the bag, most of the sawdust goes everywhere except the bag. Once I had my minuscule pot of sawdust, I decided to mix it together with some wood glue. Now I started off by doing this in a cup and just adding the wood glue, but what I found was that mixture was too dry. And then, like Goldilocks, I got a bit of board and I put some wood glue and then added in a tiny pinch of sawdust, and I found this was too wet. Now you've got to keep going until, just like Goldilocks, you get it just right. Now the reason for this is because if it's too wet, then the yellow of the wood glue will dry, it will set, and it will not allow any of the mineral oil or whatever I finish this with to adhere to it. If it's too dry, it will literally just flake off whenever you touch it. So you're just going to have to play around with this. I had to play around with it for ages. There's going to be some spots that are better than others, but this was a learning process for me. Once I'd finished and while the mixture was still wet, I decided to go against everything I've been told to do and use my chisels to scrape off the excess. Now I know this isn't good for your chisels and I know it makes a bit of a mess, but these are not expensive chisels. I'm going against the grain, so along the cut line, and I am just basically scooping out any of that excess. The only reason to do this is because I am lazy and I don't want to have to deal with excessive amounts of sanding afterwards. Now as I do this, I do pull some of the mixture out of the cracks, so as you can see I'm adding a little bit extra to it. But I'm just taking enough off that I'm not going to have to sand for any longer than I need to. Actually, I was really pleased with how this turned out, so if you haven't tried this before, please do. This was amateur hour for me, but sometimes amateur is passable. So here I am again, back in the garage the next day. Good thing is the temperature's changed. Is it a good thing that it's now -6? I cannot tell you how much this stung my hands. I was doing it in kind of 10-minute stints and then going back inside and warming up in front of the fire. It was brassic. Anyway, I'm working my way through the grits, starting at 60, going to 80, going to 120 and then to 240. Now, because I was so cold and uncomfortable, I could feel myself getting lazy. So to hold myself accountable, I got a pencil and basically just scribbled over the whole surface of this on the final grit, the 240. Oh yeah, it's cold, we know. I've mentioned it 17 times. I've never really done the whole scribbling over it thing in the past because I'm lazy and I really hate sanding. But it is a good way to make sure that you are sanding the whole of the board and not just the parts that you think need sanding. It all needs sanding, but I always tend to just go for the bits that look the roughest. Once I'd built up to 240, I decided that I didn't like the sharp corners of the board. I'd rounded them a little, but I still didn't like it. So I basically just smooth out the edges of the board, and then in some parts, like I really press on with the sander and hold it there for a long time. To give a kind of more natural look, it just seemed more fitting with this reclaimed scrap firewood board.
This thing now feels so smooth. I think I can't feel my fingers. Now, the last thing I need to do is give it a spray with some water. Then that should make any grain stand on end that needs sanding back down. I'm going to have to go inside to do this because if I spray this on this, it's going to freeze. So cold. Right, I'm back in the warmth of the house, which is very, very welcomed. I have sanded this down after spraying it with water, and I've gone to 240 grit and it feels very, very smooth. Even the dodgy side doesn't look too bad. I've got to say, I'm happier with it than I thought I would be. So in here is not actually beard balm from when I was growing my Viking beard. It looked awful. I actually made up some mineral oil and beeswax board butter, if you like. I'll post a link to the video I watched on the ratios there, but it's basically 1 part beeswax to 4 parts mineral oil, volume, And you lather it on, leave it for a few hours, and then wipe it off. And after many, many freezing cold hours and multiple days, got a cutting board. Gonna crack on.
Now my favourite part of any project, and I don't just mean because it's finished and I don't have to do it anymore, I mean you get to see what the wood actually looks like. Here you can see those grains popping out, and to be honest, this made me want to redo the whole project again, as much pain as it's caused to my fingertips. Some of those grains just absolutely pop the second I put this oil wax mixture on. There's a few blocks in there that really pop with this oil mixture. They're really obvious. Yep, smell it? Nope, don't really smell like anything. Anyway, some of them just properly kick out way more than the others, and if I had any idea what wood that was, that would be my new wood. I would use it all the time for absolutely everything. But because this came from a bag of firewood, I've got absolutely zero idea. So after multiple days graft, a lot of cold, broken fingertips, what does this thing look like?